Are you a teacher or a teaching assistant writing lesson plans for at least one class? Or maybe you're a student learning how to write lesson plans for the first time. If you're looking for a way to not only write your lesson plans, but to keep them organized, then this video about using Notion for lesson plans is for you. Hi, my name is Dr. Monica Reshavi, and welcome back to my channel. I'm a former high school teacher, college professor, and higher ed administrator. I now run operations for an online education startup. In this video, I'll demonstrate how you can create and organize your lesson plans in Notion using a template I've created for teachers and teaching assistants. If you like the template and think this would work for you, I've made the template available for purchase. While it's fun to build things in Notion, sometimes simply getting started right away is what you need to do, which in this case is build great lessons for your students. Let's get started. Before we dive into the template today, I want to point out to you that Notion for education, specifically Notion for teachers and students, is free. And I think that's the most important question I had whenever someone would tell me, hey, you should try this thing, it's for teachers. The first question I always had was, how much is it? And to be clear, it's because I didn't often have a budget. When I was a high school teacher, I didn't have a classroom budget. I had a small budget when I became a department chair, which helped me do things for training and departmental needs across several classes. When I was an undergraduate professor and also working as an administrator at the college setting, I had a budget to use for my department, but I still often didn't have a budget to really use to buy software. So I want to point out immediately that Notion for education for teachers and students is free. You can find details about that on this website that you see on my screen. So it's notion.so/products/Notion-for-education. And I'll include the link in the show notes below. There's some different examples of how Notion suggests that teachers use it, and they're really great. There's some good ideas that you can take inspiration for. I always love to see how different people put things together. So scroll through this, take a look at the information about the plans and so forth that are offered. But again, it is free for teachers and for students. You'll see some information about how you can get a discount as opposed to free. This has to do when you're wanting to have, for example, a whole class and many students in a team-based environment in Notion, but the typical just Notion for you or Notion for you to manage lesson plans or even as a student, that's free. So I wanted to make sure to get that out of the way first. Welcome to the Teacher Lesson Planner template. I'm going to walk you through all of the different components of this template so you'll fully understand how they work and you can make an educated decision about whether or not you think you might like to pick up this template to use for your lesson plans. So you'll see at the bottom of this page, there is a toggle called databases. This toggle has all of the databases that make up this lesson planner. There are 4. I'm going to walk through each one by one, and feel free and ask me any questions you have in the comments about any of the particular databases or components of the lesson planner that I discuss. So first, let's look at lesson plans. Lesson plans, this is a database type of page in Notion. This is designed to hold every single lesson plan that you need to make. Now, you could always jump right here into this lesson plans database and simply hit new and go ahead and make the templates or the different lesson plan that you have. I'm going to describe why I wouldn't recommend that, but because I have some fast shortcuts in place for you by using a template that I've designed, or you may modify that to suit your needs, but you could certainly click new and just start adding new information, a new lesson to this container that contains all of your lesson plans. So the different columns that you see here. So we have a status because I want you to be able to clearly know what's going on with this lesson plan. Not started, in progress, and then there are finished or complete statuses of taught, reflected, and archive. And these are statuses that I use when I teach. So you can certainly modify this by going to edit property and adding different properties or deleting properties here. The name is simply the name of the lesson plan, the name of the class session that you're teaching. So when I was teaching something for a given class, I always had some sort of theme, a name of the lesson, and that's what would go here. This classes field is a relation field that relates to the database called classes. I'll head over to that database in a moment, but you might have seen underneath that toggle for databases that there was a database called classes. So this just gives you the opportunity to link your lesson to your class. This next field, teaching date, is what date do you intend to teach this lesson? It's a calendar field, so you can simply click and choose the date when you will be teaching. Topics. This topics field is also a relation field, and it connects to the database called topics, and you can enter any topics you want here. I have this set up with a default template so that when you create a new one, it adds this nice tag icon, and that way it makes it easy for you to see, oh, that's a topic that I've added. And you can add more topics as you'd like. There's no limit to these. The class start and end dates. Notice this little magnifying glass. This means that it is a roll up. It is rolling up from the class database, the start and end dates of the class. Now, why is that important? I would find sometimes, especially when I was planning in advance my class lessons, I would sometimes forget the full dates of the class. I know that sounds a bit silly, but I would be teaching sometimes 8-week classes or 15 weeks. And if you're teaching multiple classes that have different dates, I find it super important to keep being reminded of, well, what are the actual start and end dates of this class? And then resources. There is a resources database, and this resources database lets you capture whatever you'd like, information from the internet, files that you upload, resources that have been shared by colleagues, and you can then connect those resources to your lesson plans. And I'll show you why that's really cool in just a moment. I'm back on the main Teacher Lesson Planner dashboard page. So we just looked at the lesson plans database. Let's take a look at the classes database. The classes database looks very similar to the lesson plan database in the sense that there's a status. The statuses are a little bit different though. In progress, because that class is currently in progress, but there are statuses of to do, so not started, in progress, and done. So a little bit different in terms of what statuses are offered, just because to me, it makes sense to think about, is a class happening right now? Is it going to happen in the future? So it's not started yet, or have I already finished it? So it's complete or done in this case. I have, again, 4 sample classes listed here. The thing I want to point out here particularly is that you can rename all of these classes. You can have more classes. You can choose to duplicate the class. So if you find that a lot of the settings are very similar, once you set this information up, you can duplicate it. And then the different fields that are here beyond class name. The start and end date of the course. So if you remember, I mentioned in the previous section about how you could see next to the lesson plan a roll-up field that showed you for that class the start and end dates. Well, that's where this comes from. The semester, this is a single select field, so you can choose when this lesson takes place. And actually, I set this up as a multi-select because in theory, I have had classes that have spanned more than one term. So you could choose more than one field here. The brief description is just whatever you'd like to write here about the class. I suggest you pull that from the syllabus or from the catalog if you have something like that, or maybe even the website for your school. When I was teaching in K-12, we would have course descriptions of all of the programs on the website for parents and prospective students to see. Lesson plans. So this is where you're seeing the lesson plans that have been connected from that lesson plans database to the particular class. So as you create those lesson plans for a given class and you pick the class, it will connect. And then on the class page, you can see all the lesson plans that have been created for it. Now, we also have information about how many lesson plans. So you'll see there's 2 fields here, and I want to point this out because I don't do a lot with Notion formulas. I find that most of what I do doesn't need formulas. However, sometimes it's fun to do things that are a little bit stylistically relevant. So here's what I've done. This field, LP stands for lesson plans, is simply counting how many lesson plans are connected to the class. So in this case, there's 1 connected for each of these sample classes. Then this field simply appends the words number of lesson plans : and then the number. Now, the reason why I do that is because in a gallery view, for example, if you did not create a formula field that did that, instead of seeing this nice pretty number of lesson plans 1, if you look in the properties for this particular setup and you see that roll-up field where I was looking up how many lessons, it would look like this. So you see how it's just a 1? I found myself thinking, 1 what? So I like using that very simple formula, and you won't have to do much in the way of modifying that so that it says number of lesson plans : and 1 instead of just the number 1. Now, as you are working with your classes, you can choose to go ahead and create additional classes here, and you're not going to have to modify this formula at all because it's simply looking in this field, LP, which is the same for each class, and then it's just putting the words number of lesson plans : and then you have that there. If you wanted to create any other additional fields that would have words in front of it like that and use a roll-up field, you can just click on this formula, go to Edit Property, and you can look at the formula and see how it puts this together. So again, I don't do a lot with formulas in Notion, but I find that simple ones like that just make it look a little bit nicer. Also, this classes database links to the resources database. And so if I've connected any resources to the particular class as opposed to a lesson, that shows here. And you'll see that I have a roll up here as well for resources. So how many resources are there? So I find that this just makes it really nice, and you can take a look and see all of the things that you have connected to your particular class. And finally, I have another formula field, number of resources. So you'll see I created another view too called gallery. And then I'll show you, just like I did a moment ago with properties, you can turn on how many resources you have as well using that formula I set up. So there are 2 resources and 1 lesson plan connected to class 2. So that's just a quick look at what the classes database looks like. Next, let's take a look at the resources database. The resources database is designed to be fairly simple, but I've put together views for each of the classes. And again, you can create a new view and filter it by a new class as you create more classes. And one of the cool things is when you're in the classes database and you rename those classes. So maybe, for example, I taught ITG 148. When I rename ITG 148 in the classes database, my filter for that class is going to show up as that class name. So instead of seeing class 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll see the names of the classes that you've created. You'll just want to rename your database view so that it would be the name of the class. And I just left it as class 1, 2, 3, and 4 for now. So you'll see that the fields I have in this database for you are captured date. I find that to be supremely useful. I always like to sort typically by captured descending because that's telling me what I captured, what I collected most recently. Now, if you're saving things using the Notion Web Clipper, and we'll include the Web Clipper link in the show notes below, it will bring in the name from the website. If you are uploading a file, you would just enter a name, or if you're putting in a link manually, just pasting it, you would just put the name for whatever you want to call that resource. The URL is captured automatically when you use the Notion Web Clipper, but you can also paste it in. You'll see that with these resources, I'm connecting them in some cases to lesson plans. Often I'm connecting them to classes. And then what I also like to do is you can add comments too. So sometimes when I find a particular resource, I saved it for a reason. Like not only do I think it would be good for this class, I liked this component. I have this comment field here so that you can add in specifically why you've saved it. I find that when I'm in the middle of a semester planning for a class and teaching another class, things get really busy. So it's super helpful for me to keep notes to myself. Now I have a tagging view set up, and this is just a very streamlined view that shows you capture date, the name, the lesson plans, and the classes and the comments. Now, when I say tagging, this is what I mean. When you initially capture something using the Notion Web Clipper, you won't have the lesson plan connected and you won't have a class connected. So these 2 columns will be empty. So I wanted you to have a view that would just be super simple where you could see, and let me show you the filter, if the class is empty or the comments is empty. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and add another rule here. So I'm just going to add one more and say, or lesson plans is empty. Because if I think that if you have any of these empty, it might be worth taking a look here to seeing 1, should I connect a lesson plan? 2, should I connect a class? Both. Or 3, do I need some comments to kind of think about why I saved this in the first place? So you'll see that was really simple for me just to add on another thing here. So I have when classes is empty, or comments is empty, or the lesson plan is empty. So that means that as these are filled up, so if you had all 3 here, this wouldn't show. But they'll continue to show, the items will show, just like you can see this one here, if I don't have something connected. But if I connected, let's see, this is about job interview prep. Looks like it might be a duplicate, but I'll go ahead and connect it so you can see how this works. I'm going to connect it to interview practice. I'll connect it to class 3, and I'll add some comments. Consider this for the next lesson. Now notice it's no longer showing me that one anymore. And the reason being is because that filter is set up to have, if this or this or this is blank, then show it here for tagging. And then the final thing to say about this particular database is I have a view again set up for every single one of those classes so that you could easily come to this particular page and find any sort of resources that are connected to the resources and the class. The last database I'm going to demo to you today before showing you what the planner dashboard includes is the topics database. And the topics database is set up so that you can create new topics related to what you are teaching or what you think you're going to teach. And so I can see you approaching this database in a number of different ways, and I'm going to describe two. One is as you're creating lessons, you think of the topics that you're teaching, you can just go ahead and click on the lesson plan in the topic field and enter a new topic. And then as you create lessons that are linked to those topics, you'll see all of them showing up here on this All Topics tab within the topics database. So that's one option. You're in the middle of creating a lesson, you're designing new lessons, you add a topic. The other way you could do it is that you could take a look at your teaching objectives and then your course outline, and you would see the objectives that you're teaching for the whole semester. And you could do this in advance. You could go in and add your different topics, and you could connect them to the classes to start off with. And then as you're teaching, as you're building your new lesson plans, you could also connect them to lessons. So I can see a number of different ways of doing this. I've also created views for you for each of your classes so that you can easily see the topics that you're teaching in a given class. But I really think it's cool to be able to look and see across all your classes, what topics am I teaching, just so that you can see how much crossover there is, and perhaps you can reuse some resources that you've collected. Now that we've taken a look at each of the databases that make up the Teacher Lesson Planner template, let's look into all of the toggles that contain all of the pre-designed views for you. And this is where I envision you doing all of the work. So under classes, if you click the classes toggle, you'll see current classes. So what are you teaching right now? And you'll see this is set up as a gallery view. You can change this image to be something else. I have the properties set up on this so that it is showing you the class name, the semester you're teaching, the start and end date, your status of the class, so it's in progress. And note that in progress is the filter for a current view. It shows you the number of lesson plans that you have created and the number of resources that you've connected to that class. Now, you can also go into these classes and you can change what the cover image looks like. You can add information about this. I can see myself adding a syllabus for each of the classes here. I can't tell you how many times I would have to go back to the learning management system for a given course and download my syllabus again because I couldn't find where I put the file. So I would see myself putting both a PDF copy, for example, and maybe the link to the syllabus too for the editable version. So that way, if I had to make a change and publish it again for students, I would have a copy of that really easy to find here. So this is super flexible. Now, this view, again, is set for current classes. So the way this is set up is that the status is in progress. So future classes, the filter is set up so that if you take a look at the rule, the status is not started yet. So anything I haven't started yet, these are just, again, some sample classes, would be here. Past classes are set up so that the filter is set with the status of done. So that way you can see what you're teaching right now, what you have on deck in the future, and the courses that you finished in the past. There's also a view for calendar, which I think is super helpful. So you can see there's no filter on this at all. So this is showing me all of the classes. So if I were to go, for example, backward in time, I would even see that class that I had in the past. I have them all set here. Now you could choose, if you'd like, to just show current classes, but I like to see a map for the entire year. So as you go out across the months, it shows the given classes. So it's really nice so I can see overlap. You could also choose to add other activities and so forth to this, but this is really set up to show you the calendar of your classes that you're teaching. Next, let's take a look at the lesson plan area. And this is the area within your Teacher Lesson Planner dashboard that I see you working quite a bit. So the lesson planner area is showing you first a calendar view. And let's take a look at how this is set up. So you can do a number of things with dates. So I wanted to give you some choices. So if you take a look at the properties, you can see this is set up as a calendar. And for show calendar by, that means what date is going to show up here. So the items that you will see here are lessons that you have given a date for. So if I take a look, I can see that creating a resume, I have that on the calendar. If I go forward in time, I added some other samples. So here's one on the 7th of December, preparing great presentations. And if I click on it, it just takes me to that full lesson that I have there. So let me go back to the lesson planner, and you again have this calendar view here. The all view is showing you a table with all of the lesson plans that have been created. And just as a reminder, what you're seeing here is this lesson plan database embedded within this toggle. So any major changes like making new views, you could certainly do it here, but I'd recommend you go back to this lesson plans database and create them here, because then when you are inside of your lesson plan section, if you click plus and you choose, for example, lesson plans, any view that you've created over on this database will show here as an option. So I just find that to be really nice and handy, and I'll delete that extra one that I just made. So again, I have calendar, I have all by class. And what that means is it's just grouped by class. So I can see for class 1, class 2, the lesson plans I have right now. I have just the lessons for class 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I have these sorted in ascending order. So you could choose to change that. You might want to sort in descending, see the last lesson that you have planned. I like to see the ones as they're coming up. And these are all set up for each of your classes. So I think this is something that would make it extremely easy for you to not only just create a new lesson, but also to go into each of the individual classes and really get a handle on what you have planned for classes coming up. Now, in addition to the fact that you can create lesson plans in Notion by just adding lessons to this particular lesson plan database, I want to point out I've made a template for you that has all of the components of lesson plans that I typically built, and I know that my colleagues and friends did as well. So here's how you access this. If you click on the arrow next to New, you'll see that I have a default template set up called the lesson plan template. I'm going to click the 3 dots next to it to go into edit mode just so you can see what this looks like. Now, this is completely editable. You could also choose to delete it if it doesn't suit you. But the information that I included in this template is things that I always needed to include in lessons. So you have different components within this. Now, at the top of this template, you have a table of contents, so you can quickly jump to any section within that template. And this is just showing it you full screen. So you can choose to go, for example, to the hook, back down to the lesson reflection, and it will jump around for you. I've also hidden away the components where you can add the objective or goal for the lesson. How are you going to hook the students' interest, capture their interest? Sometimes it's called a bridge in, but I tend to call it the hook. I have information about the teaching content. So what curriculum are you going to be covering in this given lesson? What lesson activities or what learning activities will you include? Assessments, always important to think about what informal and what formal assessments are you going to choose as in the lesson. And as we know, there's often not both, but sometimes there is. I mean, an informal question can be something as simple as asking students in a ticket out the door what they learned in a particular part of the lesson or what they took away from the lesson today. And that's an informal mode of assessment that definitely still counts. So I think that it's important to identify the different modes of assessment that you're using. My favorite part, though, once I've gotten part of this part done, because this is critical to planning the lesson, is doing my lesson outline. As someone who talks very quickly and has had to learn to really pace myself with lessons and to think about wait time, I literally would count in my head after I'd ask a question to help me slow down and wait for students to respond. I love to outline my classes in terms of start and end time for each of the different sections. So if my class started at 8:15 and ended at 9:30, I would literally pace out 15-minute chunks of each lesson. As I became more comfortable with the lesson and had taught it a few times, I didn't need to do that as much, but especially with a new lesson, I found it very valuable to map out my start and end times for each section. And then at the end, I love to include a component of reminding myself to reflect on how the lesson went, because we know as teachers that reflecting on our lessons, what worked, what didn't work, where students seemed confused, or the activities they seemed particularly excited about, those are things that while in the moment I remember and feel very confident about, 24 hours later, I might not remember them as well. So I find myself having a lesson reflection section. Having this is super useful. So this template is created for you to use directly within the teacher lesson planner. So when you're creating a new lesson plan, again, I've set this template up to be the default template, which means that when you click new in any view, it will automatically add this template. So you'll see now that it's adding it here. Now you may choose that this doesn't suit you. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the one that I just created. If you don't want that to be your default template, all you have to do is click this drop down for new, and you can choose even just empty page, the 3-dot menu, and set that as the default. You'll find it's then asking you if you want all the views in the lesson plan database or just this all view. So if you decide you don't want this template, no harm, no foul. Go ahead and just choose for all views and lesson plans so that you're not going to have it be the template. Or you could choose that you just don't want that to be the view for the default template for that particular view. And if that's the case, then just choose the view that you happen to be on. You can also modify the template. So again, if you click the 3-dot menu next to the lesson planner, you can go to edit and make any changes you want to this lesson plan template. I just love having a default template because then every time I create a new lesson plan, it will include the components that I think are important when I'm developing a lesson. Would you like to receive my best productivity tips for teachers, academic administrators, and students? Then you'll want to sign up for my monthly email newsletter. It's action-oriented, and I only share resources and tips that have worked for me. I've included the link to sign up in the show notes below this video. Next up is looking at the resources area. So within this resources toggle header, I've included the resources database. So if you remember back from the databases, this is an embedded view of the resources database. I have the tagging view up front because if you recall, I was talking about how I like to include different information. So I like to connect each item that I capture, whether it's from online using the web clipper or I've created an entry and uploaded a file. I like to connect what I found to lessons or classes or both. And then I also think it's relevant and helpful to have comments about why you've added that as well. So this tagging view is set up that it shows you. So if you recall earlier, I showed you how I had this set up for if classes is empty or comments is empty, but I'm gonna go ahead and add it also for if your lesson plans are empty as well, because that way it will show you whether the classes is empty, the comments, or the lessons is empty. And this is just sorted by captured descending, so the most recent will be at the top. And then I have the views that you saw earlier, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, and everything that I've captured. So anything that you're capturing and connecting to lesson plans and classes, you will be able to easily find and surface here. The final component to take a look at for the teacher lesson planner is the topics area. This is an embedded view of the topics database, and that includes both all the topics and each individual class and the topics that are associated with those classes. So as a reminder, just like with the lesson plans, I've created a template for you. And the template is really basic. The only thing it does is it sets it up so that when you create a new topic, whether right here or when you're creating a lesson and connecting a topic, it will put this little tag here. So you can change this if you'd like by simply clicking the 3-dot menu and edit, and then changing what you have here. The other, this is an emoji, so if you click on it, you can choose a different one. The other thing that I have set up here that I want to point out is that when you create a new topic, I've added an embedded view of your classes, and I've set it up so that it's going to show you just the topics that are relating to that given, just the class that has those topics. So let me show you more in depth what this looks like. So if I click on, for example, study skills, and I see I've got classes down here. Okay, this is showing me lesson plans that specifically have these topics associated with it. So that way it's easy for me to see. And there's a roll up showing me the classes that are connected to the given topic. So there are really, I guess, 2 components to that template, not only putting a tag for the emoji, but also embedding the lessons that have that. So it's easy for you to see in a given topic what you've connected to that topic so far. The last thing I'd like to show you about this teacher lesson planner template and why I think it just would be such a great resource to use to plan classes, whether you're a current teacher and you're planning different lesson plans, whether you're a pre-service teacher getting ready to teach your first class, or if you're a teaching or graduate assistant and you are helping a teacher to prep their lesson plans. One of the things I really love about this is when you click on any given lesson and you see all the information that you've got captured about this lesson. So not only do you have the status, so you know if you've taught the lesson yet, you can see what class it goes to. You can see if you've captured any resources related to this particular class or the lesson. You can see the start and end dates of the class, so you're reminding yourself, did I put a date that's actually within the span of the course? And you can also see the topics that are connected to it, in addition to all the information you've set up for the lesson. So I think it's just this wonderful one-stop location, one place to go to find everything you need to see related to that class that you're teaching. What are you struggling with when it comes to lesson planning with Notion? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to help. If you like this video, please let me know by subscribing to my channel, giving this video a like, and comment down below and let me know what you're currently struggling about regarding Notion. I'd love to help, and I'll see you in the next video.